Welcome to Daily Tanya. Today is Tuesday, the 21st day of Menachem Av, and today's lesson is dedicated in memory of my grandfather, Rabbi Moshe ben Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. Today's his yortzeit. Maybe be zeicha very soon to be reunited with the coming of Mashiach. Let's begin with tzedakah. Gedele tzedakah, shemekarev es hageula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. And today, we're starting letter 7 in Igeret HaKodesh, סימן. And this letter also, again, talks about tzedakah and talks about yet another deep concept in Chassidus, understanding godliness, understanding more particular the connection between the mitzvahs, the commandments, and each individual neshama. There's mitzvahs that are connected with each individual soul, and he begins with a prayer that we say every day. How fortunate we are. How good is our share? Talking about our share in God, our portion in God. And that is something that he's going to explain. He raises the questions today. The answers we'll get to tomorrow. And so let's begin inside. So here the Alter Rebbe begins, סימן זין, אשרינו, בטוב חלקנו, ומנועים גורלנו, וכו'. Fortunate are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant is our lot. So this is part that we say every single morning in the prayer. The Alter Rebbe brings another couple of verses that also suggests, we're talking about portion, and Hashem is our portion. There is a share, the portions of God. What does that mean? That is what the Alter Rebbe is asking. So here is another verse. It says, Hashem menos chelki v'choisi v'geimer. God is my allotment and my portion of my cup. Chavalim naflu li v'geimer. You support my lot. The tracts are portioned by lot, have fallen unto me pleasantly. Indeed, I have goodly heritage. Af nachal hashofra alai. So again, these verses talk about a lot, talk about a portion, and this, when it says the Alter Rebbe, we need to understand. Lahavin lashen chalkeinu v'geiraleinu. In order to understand the terms, our portion and our lot, Alter Rebbe says we need to go further to explain it. One must properly explain a common expression in the teachings of our sages of blessed memory. And the expression is, he has no part in the God of Israel. Ein lo chelek, he has no part, he has no share, no part in the God of Israel. So first of all, there's an aside note. The Rebbe points out here how the Alter Rebbe was so careful with his language. He's writing a letter to the people. And even when he just quotes a statement from our sages, he chooses a statement that does not have a negative connotation, or to minimize the negative connotation. What do I mean? This statement that it says, Alter Rebbe says, it's a common expression, and he has no part in the God of Israel. The Rebbe mentions that this is really, that exact statement is really not so common expression. He only found it in one place. The Rebbe says he found it in one place in the Medrash. There is a very similar expression that is common. And the expression goes, they have no part, ein lahem chelek, or ein lachem chelek, or you have no part, plural, and talking in first person. But here the Alter Rebbe chose to quote a statement that is actually very rare. And the reason being is because here it talks about someone else. He has no part in a third person. When he addresses the people, he doesn't want to address them, even though he's just quoting a verse, a statement, he doesn't want to address them, you have no part. This is in general by the Rebbe. We found how the Rebbe was always very, very careful when he was choosing words, not to use negative connotations, even just words like bad. The Rebbe would hardly use bad. It would say not good. And there's many examples like that. The Rebbe would be very careful when you talk to someone, you talk in general, to use only positive words. So let's continue. Says the Alter Rebbe, in any case, we find this statement that it says that he has no share, he has no part in the God of Israel. So what does it mean when you're talking about someone that has no part in God? Now, it would seem that a term like part cannot possibly be applied to God. Because he is not divisible into parts, heaven forfend. God is the ultimate in simple and uncompounded unity, the very antithesis of divisibility. Nevertheless, we find that our sages here use the term part in relation to God. How can this be? You must, perforce, conclude that though God himself is indivisible, the godly illumination that descends into Jewish souls can be described with the word part, inasmuch as it is revealed in parts, so to speak, as shall soon be explained. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, that it depends what level of godliness we are talking about. When we're talking about the very essence of God, obviously it's indivisible. Yet there is the level of godliness that comes down after contraction to be settled into this world and into different parts, so to speak. And before he explains this, the Alter Rebbe quotes yet another verse that needs explanation, which will also be explained later. That is the verse that talks about Jacob. And Yaakov built an altar. It says they built the altar and he called it the God of Israel. It says the Alter Rebbe, this concept can be understood by considering a verse concerning Jacob, and it says he called him Kael, God of Israel. That verse really has different commentaries that struggle to understand what that means. Who called who? Some say Jacob called the altar that he built God, the God of Israel, that this is an altar for God, the God of Israel. And there's a number of questions here. Alter Rebbe now goes on to explain the meaning of the verse in order to answer a number of simple questions. Until this verse, the name Jacob is used consistently. Why does this verse suddenly change to Israel? And B, how does this conclusion of the verse relate to its beginning? And he set up an altar. And C, what is novel about the epithet, Kael, God of Israel? So those questions will be answered tomorrow, God willing. And here, the Alter Rebbe begins with explaining in general, when we're referring to God as the Holy One, blessed be He, HaKodesh Baruch Hu. The word the Holy One suggests that this is holy, means separated, aloof, elevated. And the word Baruch means drawn down, blessed. That also means drawn down, which seems to be really a contradiction. He's saying he's aloof, he's separated, and yet he's saying he's drawn down. So the Alter Rebbe goes to explain this. Pirush. The meaning of this verse is as follows. Kihine, be'emes HaKodesh Baruch Hu kishmoi kein hu. The truth, the Holy One, blessed be He, is true to His name. Which means, on one hand, the phrase Holy One in the Hebrew original Kadosh implies that God stands above and apart from creation, while blessed be He, where the Hebrew word Baruch, literally blessed, also means to descend and to be revealed. This implies that the level of godliness which previously was holy and apart, the indirect He in the phrase quoted, is drawn down into the world in a revealed manner, as will soon be explained. So the word Baruch, Kadosh means elevated, apart. Baruch means blessed, means drawn down also. Like there's the words in the Mishnah, Hamavrich et hagefen, when you draw down the branch of the vineyard and put it down into the ground. Is it called grafting or something like that? So that is called Baruch. Baruch means drawn down. Says the Alter Rebbe, because when we're talking about God, there is the level of godliness that fills the world, and there's the level that does not, that is equally in the higher and the lower equal. In other words, there's the level of godliness which is the essence of Hashem. It says He is everywhere, and He, although He's present in the higher and the lower world alike, but yet is not, it's a one-way relation. It's not that He's affected by the world. Let's see how the Alter Rebbe explains it. Though He permeates all the upper and lower worlds, from the peak of all levels to this lowly corporal world. Now here, although He uses the word memale, which usually means filling the world in an individual manner, meaning affecting each creation according to its needs, but that's not what this is referring to. Here, the word memale means that He permeates everything alike, the whole entire world, that God is there, God is present there. And He brings the verse that says, as it is written, do I not fill the heaven and the earth? Meaning the heaven and the earth, it's all equally filled with God, with godliness. Ani mamash says, who fills Ani? I am. I myself, my very self. Meaning God's very being and essence, as it were, and not only His glory. There's another verse that says, Melo kol haaretz kevodo, His glory fills the earth. And that refers to a lower level, a level of godliness that was condensed and filtered, so to speak, to bring down to this earth. But the world that Hashem Himself permeates, He's at the same time permeating every part of the world, and at the same time He's apart from the world. He's elevated and separated. And is not contained in the world. What does that mean? It says the Alter Rebbe, Afal Pikeinu Kodesh Umuvdel Me'elyonim V'Tachtenim Ve'eino Nitpas B'Seichem Chas V'Shalom. He is nevertheless holy in the sense of apart from the upper and lower worlds, and is not at all contained in them, heaven forbid. And he brings an example to show, to contrast what it means something is grasped and contained within something. So he says, the contrast would be the soul of man. The soul of man is in the body. Now, when the soul of man is in the body, it creates a two-way relationship. The soul affects the body and keeps the body alive. The body also, whatever happens to the body, affects the soul as well. If a person is exhausted, the body is exhausted, the soul is not going to be able to do what the soul needs to do, to be able to think and meditate and contemplate and connect emotionally, spiritually. You can't do it. You have to have the body. So at the end of the day, when you're talking about the person, what are you talking about, the soul, or are you talking about the body? Of course, you're talking about both of them together. Together, they create the entity of a person. But by God, God fills every part of the world. But it's a one-way connection, communication, a one-way relationship. The Hashem, God affects the world, but the world does not affect God himself. He's not contained in them. That's what Alter Rebbe says. Kitfisas nishmas ha'odam begufay al derech mashal. In the way by analogy, that the soul of man is contained in his body and is affected by the changes within it. Unlike the soul, God is not at all affected by the world in which he is to be found. As explained elsewhere at length. And for this reason, meaning since God is entirely distinct and apart from all of the worlds, they could not receive their life force from his being and essence in itself, as it were. It's too much, too intense of power that for us to be able to contain and to receive our life force directly from Hashem himself. Rather, the diffusion of the life force whereby the Holy One, blessed be He, animates the upper and the lower worlds. This is, metaphorically speaking, like radiance shining from His name. It is a radiance that shines from God's name. Now, what does it mean? What is God's name? So a name, just like using example of a name of a human being. A name, on the one hand, a person doesn't need a name for himself. It's not the person himself. If you live by yourself on a deserted island, you don't need a name. Yet on the other hand, the name represents the entirety of the person. It doesn't describe only a part of the person. You're calling the person by name. The name affects the very essence of the person. So that's why they say when a person, God forbid, faints, one of the ways to wake up the person is you call him by name. The name affects, touches his very essence. So when we're talking about Hashem, there is, so to speak, the name of God, which represents the entirety of God, but it's not this God himself. The name of Hashem also is aloof and elevated from the world. There is only a shine that shines from the name. Like when you say the sun, you look at the sun, you can't see the sun, you can't look at the sun. But you look at the moon, you can see the moon, you can look at the moon. The moon carries also the light of the sun, but it's reduced. It's a shine of a ray of the sun. So the same thing here. It says, God's name is itself merely a radiance. From it, there emanates yet another radiance from the name. And he and his name, because he and his name are one, for which reason a ray that emanates from his name is able to animate the various worlds. The name itself is also too high and aloof. Thus it is written, for even his name alone is exalted. Meaning God's name is exalted alone, standing apart from all worlds, which it transcends. And only his reflection and his splendor are on the earth and the heavens. Thus all of creation exists from but a radiance of God's name, which, as previously mentioned, is itself merely a radiance. This radiance actually vests itself in the upper and lower worlds in order to animate them. The upper world, the spiritual worlds, where godliness is more revealed, and the lower worlds, as we mentioned many times in the Tanya, there's so many different levels of how the godliness of the radiance of God's name was reduced and filtered further and further until this physical world was created. When it passes, it is contained in them by means of many intermediaries, meaning levels that are related both to the level above and below them, thereby enabling them to serve as conduits for the transference of the radiance, and by means of numerous and intense contractions. In a downward chain-like progression through the levels of the various worlds in a sequence of cause and effect and so on. So within every world, the lower level develops from the higher level by way of cause and effect, the higher level serving as the cause and the source of the lower. After all these contractions and descents, then the light manifests itself within the various worlds by becoming vested in them. So this is explaining the first part of this letter. And tomorrow we will continue with the explanation. And so join us tomorrow. And also don't forget to share this with other people. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.